Welcome to another episode of the 100% podcast with me, your host, Harry Purdy. Today, I'm joined by myself for another episode of 100% with Harry Purdy. I've taken the opportunity this week to tick two boxes or kill two birds with one stone by getting a review of the Goggins event done, the fundraiser done, whilst also creating a YouTube video at the same time, which will put some footage over the top and all of those kind of things to just highlight the fact of the challenge that I have recently ticked off and achieved, but most importantly, currently raising over £1,400 for the amazing charity, which is Movember. Now, the Goggins challenge, just to remind you, was 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. And this is the review for it. So if you want to stick around, listen to how I got on, then this is definitely the podcast or the YouTube video for you. Now, David Goggins himself is an absolute animal. He's done events all over the world, up to 200 miles in the desert, and all of these kind of things. And this is kind of one of his little challenges that he's set the general public to go out and prove whether you can tolerate resilience, tolerate the distance, and just push yourself to the absolute limit in an element where you probably don't need to train too much, right? And obviously, being on the journey that I've been on for the last 7 to 8 years, I knew that I could run 4 miles, but could I run 4 miles every 4 hours, 48 hours? That was the challenge of this. And obviously, at the end of the 2 days, I did manage to tick off the totals. I did manage to do it in the time frame. I did manage to run 46 out of the 48 miles. We'll come on to why I didn't run two of them shortly. But overall, an unbelievable experience. And when I got interviewed on a podcast yesterday, and when I got asked about the challenge itself, did I find it difficult? It was a really interesting place that my brain went because of course it was difficult because I ran 48 miles. I was sleep deprived. I was having to really focus. There was no relaxation in that 48 hours because it was about fueling, it was about sleeping, it was about then getting up ready to go again. I had to make sure I had my trainers on a rotational system to keep them dry or make them dry after the flood effect or the flood waters that had been going on in the UK, especially in the southwest of the UK with the storm over that time frame. So there was no real downtime for me, and it was a challenge in terms of mentally being switched on for that long, apart from in those periods of rest, which we can talk about. But overall, I did find it manageable. And the reason that I found it manageable was because I had put myself in challenging situations physically in the past with the London Marathon, with the ultra marathon, with half marathons, with the training for the London Marathon, and all of those good things as well. And training for the ultra marathon as well, I can't forget to put in there, and all the lessons that I learned from that, which you can go back in previous podcasts and listen to. But if we speak about the Goggins challenge specifically, I started at 1:30 in the morning. One thing that I would change differently already is I wouldn't be starting this challenge a day after getting back from a period of holiday in Krakow or anywhere really. I didn't give myself enough time to rest before it. So essentially before the challenge even started, I wouldn't say sleep deprived, but short of sleep. Let's go with that because sleep deprived and being a little bit tired are two different things. But starting the challenge tired definitely didn't help in terms of when it came to the end and how tired I was feeling on the second day. But I started the challenge at 1:30 in the morning. Shout out to Jody Bovey who came out with me on both of those 1:30 runs. Absolute legend. Kept me going, G'd me up all the way round. And I'll come on to thank yous at the end of the show. But one thing that was a shock to the system straight away was fuck me, it's 1:30. But also where this flood and storm had beaten up the southwest of England or England in general in on that date was that when I got zero point 0.5 miles into my first run, I realized that this was going to be a wet and soggy run because I had to travel through about 100 meters worth of flood water, which obviously at that time in the morning, freezing cold, very muddy, very wet on your feet. Hence the thinking about trying to ensure that my trainers were dry throughout the whole challenge. And I was rotating between three pairs of trainers as well. And the other thing that I look back on at that 130 run was the realization of the challenge that I had ahead of me. Like this was one run of 12 that was going to be 4 miles long and over the course of 48 hours. And I know that's essentially the challenge, but it was one of those things where you're like, oh shit, this has started. I remember that feeling, or this has started. I remember that feeling at the start of my ultra marathon as well, 10K in, being like, okay, that's the first checkpoint of 5. This is going to be a long day. And obviously, this challenge meant that it wasn't just a long day, it was going to be a long 2 days. But the first day overall was an incredible experience and a day where I fondly look back on running with Becky, whose father and grandfather had had previous diagnosis of prostate cancer, and that was a nice moment to be able to show direct support to somebody and their family who had had direct influence from the illnesses that Movember raised money for to support. It was interesting as well to run with completely new people who had never really had conversations with. And also, it was generally quite fun because on multiple times during those runs on the first day, I had perfect weather. So fundamentally, on the first run at 1:30, even though I said I had the realization, the sky was incredibly clear and I could see like 1,000 stars on the first run, and that was amazing. And also on the afternoon and the mid-morning run, the sun was out. So of course that feels good anyway. And at that point, my body's not necessarily feeling too fatigued. But quite quickly that weather changed. And at 9:30 on the first day, when Anna came up from Bournemouth with banana bread, what a legend, and also last minute saw that I had a run free and decided to make the trip up from Bournemouth to support me. The weather changed and it got wet again. The puddle that had started to, or the flood waters that had started to dim down a little bit or dip down a little bit, rose again. And it was a tough run that 9:31 because of the water, because of the 20 miles in the system. But actually, when I finished it and got home, it was the first time, even though we recorded a podcast, that I started to feel a little bit fatigued, a little bit tired. And then it was important that I realized that the rest periods that I was having had to be a priority going into the second day. The second day, after another 1:30 run with Jody, and I would speak specifically about that run. It was a run that was really hard. I didn't nail my sleep pattern, and the sleep cycles that I was aiming for would be a sleep cycle that anybody should aim for in those kind of situations. Would be a rest of 90 minutes, whether that be with your eyes shut, not doing anything. But luckily, I was falling asleep, but I just over egged it. Got around the 2 hour mark and woke up with the alarm and just felt horrendous. And I was fully in my own head on that run. And any runner will tell you that those runs where you are in your own head and you're not in flow are always the worst ones. But Jody was great, just kept me ticking along, and we ticked round and I got back. And luckily, I nailed my sleep pattern or sleep routine, the 90 minutes and the refueling, ready for 5:30 with Jan on the next morning. Which again, what an amazing run that was with Jan. Just listening to the way that he spoke about uh, earning the right to feel tired, earning that right to feel groggy, earning that right to be in the pain cave. And essentially, that's where I was at. I was in the pain cave by that point. Not from a pain perspective, but completely from a I was tired, I was feeling fatigued. But still, at that point, I had at least, no, I did have 4 more runs to do. 9:30, 1:30, 5:30, 9:30. And as well on that day, on day two, where I'd been eating the same kind of stuff, cream of rice with protein, cereal, tried to keep the fiber down. Obviously, didn't want the food impacting my stomach too much. I wanted easily digestible things that were going to go straight into my system, whilst also keeping my carbs up. At no point did I want to feel carb depleted or even calorie depleted. It didn't really matter what I was eating as long as it was easily digestible, high in energy, and didn't allow me to drop into an area where I was risking myself of a glycogen drop where my muscles would have just got insanely tired, seized up, and cramped. And also, as well, I had to focus really, really hard on my hydration. But one thing I would say on that second day is I started to get a little bit of food fatigue, where I was having to consistently eat every 4 hours quite a lot of food to replenish myself. Bearing in mind, Strava was telling me, and I know I would never really go off of. No, I would go off of an app to tell me how many calories I was losing because over an average, it's going to give you a rough idea. But specifically, is it to the is it to the absolute pinpoint calorie amount? Probably not. But it does give you an indication. So every run I was going out, I was burning 500 to 600 calories, which means when you think about that as a whole, as well as my daily expenditure anyway, I'm just going to do that 12 times 600. I could have done that in my head really. Was it extra 7,500 calories extra that I had to consume over those couple of days? And I don't feel like I nailed that completely, but I got as close to it as possible whilst having that food fatigue and whilst trying to force food down my throat, even when I didn't really want to eat. And again, anybody who's had that experience on a endurance event knows exactly what I mean by that. And then the other thing that I would remember from that second day was just how incredibly supportive everybody was. The messages I was receiving on the day, the extra support that came in from people who would just join me last minute if they noticed that I had a run that didn't have anybody there supporting me. Like Louis Morgs was unbelievable, and again I'll come on to thank yous shortly. But Lewis Morgs was so supportive, got right involved in the videos and being on Instagram and all those kind of things. And special shout out as well to Dom Rowe, who on the penultimate run, which we can talk about, I had like I don't know what it was to be honest with you. It could genuinely have been just a muscle cramping or something in my stomach, but I said in a video that I was at a 7.5 out of 10, but at some points of that run, it felt like somebody was twisting my abdomen, like on my abs or on my diaphragm, and it really, really was like buckling me over. But luckily, between that run finishing and the last run with Alice at 9:30, something just either I got an adrenaline rush because I knew it was the last run, the recovery that I'd had by getting into a hot bath and really chilling out and making sure that I'd eaten enough food and all of those kind of things before the last run really came into play. And I did manage to finish the whole run. I didn't walk at all. And I thought that that last run was going to have me absolutely in bits, but it didn't at all. My body reacted well, actually, from the circumstance that it had delivered me from the second to last run. But what would I do? Well, how would I summarize the Goggins challenge? It would be something that would be hard. It would be something that would be worth the effort when you've put it in at the end. It would be something that I would say if anybody's looking at doing an ultra to look at doing to see if you can tolerate those kind of endurance events. But overall, I was insanely proud of how I handled it. And going through from that, what was the lessons? What were the key takeaways from it? Was when it came to that second to last run, there's always an element, and I'm gonna use the a little phrase. So I watched a podcast episode with Andrew Huberman and a guy called Lex Friedman. And Lex Friedman was going to do the Goggins challenge with David Goggins, and they were going to record on the way round and all these kind of things. And he asked Andrew Huberman his advice, and then Andrew Huberman second-handedly went to David Goggins and asked Goggins for his advice to give to Lex Friedman. And he went through all these like analytical things and how to look after your sleep, which the advice that I looked at, and as well, my coach Aaron delivered me that advice as well. But he also said there's these tablets called SIUs, and the I was like, oh, this is interesting. I've never heard of these. But actually, the joke of this is that there's no such thing as a SIU tablet. It's just suck it up, right? Suck it up. And genuinely, at times of this challenge, where some people would give up, where some people would say they'd had enough, like I'm a celebrity, getting me out of here kind of vibes, you have to suck it up if you want to complete it. And there was no way in a million years, unless of serious injury, that I was going to not finish this thing. Like it was always going to happen, but I did have to suck it up at times. So that's a lesson one. In life, you just have to suck things up. Number two, planning is key. And I probably got that wrong at the start. I feel maybe that's why I've had a bit of a knock-on effect with illness afterwards, is because I didn't nail my like I didn't I'm not going to make excuses, but November was fucking busy and it was genuinely the only 2 days I could fit in unless I took more annual leave and all these kind of things. And really, at the end of it, I've completed it, I've done it. But if I was to ensure that I was even more proactive, even more responsible before, I would make sure that I was coming into this event really, really, really fresh, like 100%, if we're going to stick to the analogy and the comparison to the podcast. And then afterwards, recovery is vital. I took a week out of the gym. I've ensured that my food, my nutrition has come back on point. I've made sure that my lifestyle this last week has been pretty chilled out because, as well, I've had the knock on effect of the illness as well. Number four, ask for help. This challenge was made easy because I was supported by 11 different groups of people or individuals, right? And you can't beat that. Something that I would say, and I said in a video as well, is that in this in life we are almost subtly guided towards the negative things, right? Like how expensive things are, the wars around the globe, uh, to name a few. But within community and when you ask for help and when you receive that help, it is such an important reminder to me that there is some positivity there when people deliver on helping you fundraise, when people deliver on helping you round the course, when people deliver on coming to ensure that you're well looked after with food, with massage, with all of those kind of things as well. And when you see that firsthand, it's an amazing reminder how amazing the human race can be. And what I would say about all of those people who will come on to at the end, which I keep saying, is that they chose to do that. They chose on that day to impact somebody else in a positive way. And if everybody did that on a day-to-day basis, how much better would this world be? Be quite an interesting thing for you to think about and take away from this podcast. And a reminder for number five that links into like a almost a secondary lesson of this fifth one is that you can achieve anything. Completing that 48 miles over 48 hours not only gave me a complete perspective to look, or gave me the perspective to look back, or gave me the opportunity to look back at previous versions of myself and be like, Jesus, man, you've come a long way. Like, well done, which we don't do enough. I don't feel like we give ourselves enough praise in this life. But it did give me that opportunity. And it gave me an opportunity to remind you that you can achieve anything you put your mind to if you give yourself the time to do it. And the other thing, the bonus lesson from this, is that when you take on hard challenges, when you take on hard things, when you decide to do hard things, it gives you confidence in life. Anyway, moving to the thank yous. Thank you to Alice Vincent, Jodie Bovey, Jan Bovey, Dom Rowe, Becky Wilkins, Jade Uren, Adi Wilton, Anna Priest, Lewis Morgan, Paula Vine, and all the girls at Girls Run Club for coming along and supporting me on this Goggins challenge. I really, really appreciate it. Like I've said, it proves that there is positivity in the human race still, even though we're told that there isn't. My dad, I'm giving you a special shout out. I love you, man. You've gone away and you've helped me raise £345 on top of the money that we've raised already. So actually, there's a total of 1,700 and something. But Dad went away to the local club and he got all of his mates to sponsor me as well. And he grew a moustache to support the challenge as well. And then final one, Mr. James Millard, you came in clutch when I felt a little bit of an injury in my Achilles, and I got a free massage from you. And mate, those little touches that the community ethic and element brought the challenge really, really, really helped me out. So I cannot thank you enough. This has been another episode of 100% Podcast. If you've enjoyed listening to the Goggins review, please drop a like and subscribe on YouTube. It goes a long, long way to helping out. And that's the main reason why I've done this podcast today. But if you are listening to the podcast and you're not seeing my facial expressions and all those kind of things, but you do love listening to the show, I'm back with a new guest next week. Make sure you like, subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And make sure you leave a 5-star review because it goes a long, long way to helping the show. I did this challenge because I want people to get healthier. I want people to feel better. I want people to become their own version of 100%. And you can do that by using my free 14-day journal, which you can find in the description of this episode. I've been Harry Purdy. I'll see you here with a new episode next week. Take care.